Luke chapter 6, verses 37 through 40. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. He also told them this parable: Can the blind lead the blind? Will they not both fall into a pit? The student is not above the teacher, but everyone who is fully trained will be like their teacher. Now, we don't have the following verses, but in the next one, famously, verses 41, I believe, through 43, is the example of the log in your own eye. And so, taken together, these three, we're really going to look at these verses, but taken together, these three all deal with the subject of judging others. And this is a difficult, thing to talk about because of our modern context. Judging can be seen as just like any negative opinion. Any negative opinion of someone. That's not quite right. I think when we define it so broadly, we run into lots of trouble. Anyway, it becomes a little bit nonsensical. But it is certainly this concept of negative opinions of somebody. There is more than just a negative opinion, but even a condemning of another person. And we could add to this just kind of a critical spirit. So that person that, you take them to a new restaurant and they're just kind of always criticizing everything, right? That's kind of this critical spirit, I'd say, is what's really being addressed here. And now we arrive in this place for a variety of reasons. We need to remember that the Pharisees had arrived here and conditioned the people for the last 400 years to become a very critical people, always looking for the smallest infraction of of their customs, right, which were they put in place to protect the law. But when you're doing that all the time, when you walk around just constantly judging, we end up in a place where we are just in complete opposition to God and what He's doing in our lives. And so He is going to provide then 3 reasons not to have, and I'll say it this way, a judgmental attitude. The last one, which we won't go into, is this one, that you have this log in your own eye. But we'll go into the 2 here in our text for today. Let's begin. First command, do not judge. Second one, do not condemn. Third, forgive. Fourth, give. And then he gives, for this set of 4 commands, we get 1, 2, 3, 4. There's a relationship between 1, 2, and then 3, 4. But in any case, what I want us just to see is that those 4 are then grounded in this final statement of truth. Okay? So that's the relationship here. This text right here provides the theological ground for the 4 commands that come above. Okay? For the 4 commands. And where 1 and 2 are linked, there's a link between these 2 commands. So too, there's a link between 3 and 4, and they are basically 2 sides of the same coin. Okay? Here we go. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. So there's this little promise here that to the one who judges not, they will themselves not be judged. Secondly, do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. So a similar construction here, identical construction here. There is a question that we should ask in the second half of this promise. You will not be judged, and you will not be condemned. The question is, by who? And if it's by whom, forgive me, I'm not that good at grammar. We will not be judged by who? There are two possible answers. One is other people. And in this answer, the idea is, like if you're not walking around as a judgy person, people are probably not going to be judgy with you. If you're not walking down as a condemning person, people are probably not going to be condemning towards you. So there's this kind of practical wisdom that Jesus may be alluding to. The second possibility is by God, right? Meaning that if I don't judge other people's, God will not judge me. And if I don't condemn other people, God will not condemn me. That could be. Both seem to kind of fall short, don't they? With people, it seems like Jesus is talking about more than just wisdom. And for God, if that's all there is to it, it seems like some strange loophole, right? Strange loophole in salvation. It's like, actually, there's two ways to be saved. One is just to never judge anybody. The other is to ask God to forgive you, right? So we have to obviously keep reading to understand if it's one or two and what is meant by Christ. That would be the second question we could ask. What does this really mean, right? That we will not be judged. And so let's keep going. And maybe we'll find the answer as we go through. The next command, forgive, and you will be forgiven. Same construction. And we're left with the same possibilities. Who is doing the forgiving? Other people or God? And again, give, and it will be given to you. Boom. Same construction, same questions. Who is doing this? What does this mean? So in these four commands, they're just kind of dropped here by Jesus. They're not super clear on the front end. And so what Jesus does, and so we're just kind of understanding, here is the command, right? And now Jesus is going to begin to explain what he means in this next piece. So we're going to get some context, right? And then we'll get some, finally some reason here at the end. Okay. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over will be poured into your lap. So the good measure here, a good measure, and that good measure is now explained. The word good here is explained here in this picture of pressed down, shaken together, and running over. And so you can imagine going to the market and some guy has a jar and he says, for this jar of flour, it's going to be $5. And you say, okay, that seems fair. So he tells you to put out your robe. He's going to pour this flour into your robe. He begins to fill his jar. And the first thing he does is he presses that flour down into the jar. And then he starts to shake it so that it settles some more. And you can see him adding some more in. And then he fills it so much that it's running over. And then that's what he pours into your lap. So it's not like you got $5. It's almost like you got $6 or $7 worth of flour, right? And this is the concept behind give, right? Give and it will be given to you. What will be given to you? A good measure will be given to you. A good measure of what? Well, that's key, right? A good measure of what, right? The principle here in this concept is that the things that we give, we've been told to give forgiveness, and we've been told to just kind of give in general, right? So we know that. We know that at least we're talking about grace and love here, right? That if we're giving out grace and love, a good measure of grace and love will be pressed out, shaken together, running over, and poured into our lap. If we're understanding everything so far. It would be very easy to walk away with the impression that grace is a thing earned. That if we give grace, God will give grace to us. If we give grace to others, God will give grace to us. Then he says this, for with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Again, the word for reminds us that this statement here becomes the theological ground for everything above. With the measure you use, it will be measured to you. What this means is the way that you treat others, the way that you measure others, the way that you judge, condemn, or are gracious and forgiving towards others demonstrates your personal, moral responsibility. In Romans chapter 2, which is where I would say this theology becomes explicit, Paul says that Greeks who die apart from the law will not be judged by the law. They will be judged by their conscience. So God doesn't, go to the Gentile and say, hey, you ate pig, so now you've sinned, so now you're going to hell. The Gentile is responsible for what is on their conscience, right? So understand this then, understand this principle. If I can judge others, and if I can condemn others, if I can see what they're doing is wrong and pronounce judgment upon them, then now I am responsible. That measurement is going to be applied to me. Let me erase my lines here. I want to draw lines to a different spot. If the measure I use is I see person A and they are lying and that is wrong and I am condemning them in my heart, I'm condemning them with my words, I'm condemning them with my thoughts, you liar, right? Then I am going to have that measurement applied to me. I'm now culpable. So God is going to say, hey, Joe, you knew it was wrong for so-and-so to lie, and yet you lied, right? Okay. So there's that, right? But then there's like this other side of looking at other people's evil. I can recognize it and condemn, or I'll just highlight this in green. I can recognize and condemn, or I can forgive. I can recognize and forgive, and I can be gracious and loving anyway. And perhaps that's the measure that I will use, right? And I mean, elsewhere in the book of Luke and all over Jesus' teaching, Jesus explains that those who have been forgiven should be people who give forgiveness. So I don't think that Jesus is telling us, if you forgive, I will be forgiving to you. I think what Jesus is saying is when you've really experienced my forgiveness, you are now supposed to forgive others, right? And so when he says the measure that you use, it will be measured to you, there's a difference between person A in the green, right? And person B in the yellow. Person B in the yellow has experienced grace. The person A has not. So all they know is wrath, right? And when he says, with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. The point is, we are all responsible for what we know. We're all responsible for what we believe. And so, you don't want to be the person who only knows wrath. You want to be the person who also knows grace, the grace of God. And the proof that we've received the grace of God is that we're generous with it. We forgive and we give graciously. And we know that God will be gracious to us in the same way. God is incredibly fair. So there's the theological ground for the above commands. And let's go on to verses 39 through 40. So here would be, if this is reason number 1, here's reason number 2. He also told them this parable. So this is an addition to that previous statement. Here's the parable. Can the blind lead the blind? Will they both not fall into the pit? Boom. Parable over. It's just a question. Can the blind lead the blind? So can someone who doesn't see their sin well take another person by the hand and say, let me show you how to live. Let me show you how to avoid sin. You got one sinner here with another sinner here. Can the blind lead the blind? Will they not both fall into a pit? What's the pit here that the Pharisees had really brought a lot of people into? Self-righteousness. When you are so busy policing everyone else, when you are so busy trying to make sure that everyone else is obeying the law, you become the blind leading the blind. You don't recognize your own spiritual lostness, that you are now responsible for something you can never actually attain to. And so you become like the blind leading the blind, right? This is what happens when we promote a critical culture. We have to be very careful about this. And the corrective, right? So here's, if we're looking at this is the issue, right? And here is, in these parts, the corrective. And the corrective is basically recognize that you're blind. The student is not above the teacher. That's the first thing. But everyone who is fully trained will be like their teacher. So you got like two kind of pictures here. One, the student is not above the teacher. Okay, so student, right? Teacher. So let's say you have student, teacher, and let's say you have a person over here, and student runs over and starts to condemn before the teacher has done anything. Let's say the teacher is silent. What is happening? That student is saying, I know better than teacher. It's a usurping of the teacher's authority. It's a stain upon the teacher's honor for this student to put themselves at. So when Peter rebukes Jesus, right? He is forgetting that a student is never above their teacher. Okay, we are not up here. Bloop, bloop. We're down here. Okay. But, right, so, I mean, if this is all that Jesus gave us, if this is all that, then the answer would be just like, never tell anyone they've done wrong. They've done wrong. But here's the corrective to that concept, or not even the corrective, that's not the right word. Here's the other part of this important thing for us to remember. Everyone who is fully trained will be like, we will be like our teacher. So what Jesus is saying is that a fully trained disciple is, though not above Christ, they can be kind of almost beside Christ. They can be next to Christ. They can be near Christ. They can be like Christ. And that means that person is going to be able to say to somebody else, hey brother, I see this sin in your life. There is grace for you in Jesus Christ. Can I help you and walk with you to overcome that sin, right? Which is how God treats us. That's how he expects us to treat others, right? And then you get this 41 through 43, you get the log out of your own eye. That's the process of becoming fully trained, right? Then you'll be able to deal with the speck in somebody else's eye. So we're seeing all of this. What Jesus is not saying is never judge. He's not saying that at all. He's saying that if you have a judgmental attitude, that you're blind, right? That you're immature. And what you need to do is learn grace, learn forgiveness, receive it from Christ, grow to become like him, and then you'll be able to go and start helping other people with their stuff. So judging, not so that we can condemn, but judging so that we can see someone else's sin and help them become more like Christ is what Christ wants of us. This concept of with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. We measure, hopefully, the measure that we use is the measure of the grace that we've received from Christ. Then we can go about helping our brothers and sisters. Before that, we are not going to be very good. We're going to be a lot like the Pharisees, dealing with a lot of self-righteousness. So there you go. That is Luke chapter 6, verses 37 through 40.